Welcome back, everybody, to the No Ball Dynasty podcast. Still trying to get that right. Bentley and I had a different podcast that we had a different name that we don't do anymore. Today it's just Bentley and I, no one else here, unfortunately for everybody. And we're going to go over some questions that we received in the Dynasty basketball subreddit. I basically asked people for questions, looking, player evals or what should they do in certain situations, or league specific questions like how do you administer the league. So that's what we're gonna go over. But first, Bentley, how are you doing?
Good. Fighting off the last remnants of a migraine that inflicted itself upon me basically the entire weekend, so that was pretty sick. But I feel a lot better. So I'm happy to be here and then record another show.
Yeah, happy to have you here. I think this is our fourth episode officially. I recorded one this morning, and then fourth episode. It's going great. Happy to have you here. Um, yeah, sorry about the migraine. Who was that football player that always had the migraines for Minnesota? What was his name? Wide receiver, kick returner. You remember? It was just,
You
like a
talking about
decade ago.
Percy Harvin
Yeah, Percy Harvin. Yeah, Florida
with
guy,
the
right?
Seahawks?
Yeah, didn't he play for Minnesota at some point too?
It's very possible. But you're right, he did go to Florida.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I know he played for Seattle. He returned a kickoff in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Yeah.
He did. He was drafted by Minnesota. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's what I thought. But so when I was younger, I used my sister. I didn't have a lot of empathy, as a lot of young people don't. Um, and my older sister had like real bad migraines, and she was always like, debilitated, debilitating towards her. And I was like, "Oh, you got a bad headache? Like, get over it." And then Harvin started doing that, and I remember I don't know, I was in middle school or high school, I guess, when that was happening, and I was like, "Oh, this, like, really tough guy is not playing football, so it must actually be pretty."
Yeah.
So, yeah, I apologize to my sister in this moment, and I know it's not fun for you either, but I appreciate you being here to do
Percy
that.
Harvin Percy Harvin, Virginia guy, so it must be something in the water.
Yeah, yeah, the James River or something just kinda poisoned. Uh Alright, well, I guess let's get started. I wanna say who gave us the Reddit username of the people who gave us the questions too, just to give them a shout out. This first one, very easy, 4 letters, YKTB. Don't know what it means, but that's the user. I appreciate the question. They said, in a points league, which we play categories, but this is a question about a points league, who would you guys take 1 through 4 in the draft? I'll let you go ahead because you got a Duke player in there. I know you got some biases about who you would take. Um, yeah, I'll
So,
let say your piece.
well, I actually don't. My let me preface this: the list that I came up with was not a dynasty. It was like a year over year kind of draft. It would change, and I can kind of come up with one on the fly in terms of a dynasty league. But if let's just say, for the sake of the first part of this question, we're talking year over year draft points league only. I think it's a. I think three of them are clear cut, and the fourth one could be a little bit debatable, right? So you know, in no particular order, the top three, it looks like Jokic, Luka, and Vic. Obviously, Wembanyama. The fourth position there on my current list is SGA. It's 25 every single night, and then like 7 rebounds and 6 assists, whatever his. I don't know what he's averaging right now on the season, but every time I watch him play, it's somewhere in that ballpark at a minimum. And he's durable. Obviously, bad timing because he's not playing right now. But unless Sam Presti is telling them to sit him out like they did the first 2 years he was in Oklahoma City, he plays every single night and he's scoring, like I said, at least 20. He's got that. So for me, it makes there's a myriad of other dudes that I think could compete for that fourth spot, but for the consistent output, I think SGA is the safest pick at 4 there.
Yeah, I think that there's a clear top 4 even in points leagues. I don't disagree with you. Giannis moves up in the points leagues. He gets close to that for me, but yeah, I don't disagree with you. And then I want to ask the question another way because I don't know which way he meant it, so I'm gonna ask it both ways. If you were drafting the rookie class of next year, who who would be the 1 through 4? Which is I don't know which one he meant, so we'll answer both. I think the first one's a little easier. I think this question's a little tougher.
Okay, so you're asking me for next year's class? Like if we're
Like if you're
drafting rookies next year, who's my 1 through 4 in a points league?
Yeah, you already have a dynasty team, so you're drafting
Yeah.
rookies,
Okay.
not a redraft or anything like that.
Okay, well, this is also is a little difficult. So there's obviously a 1 through 4, right? And maybe even a 1 through 5 that are pretty locked in at the top. It depends on if you are risk averse or looking for like the highest ceiling guy. But if we're going straight with points, I think DeBonsta probably has to be 1. Peterson, I would assume is 2, and then like Boozer and Caleb Wilson. I say that because like DeBonsta is going to be the most immediate impact, I assume, just from a scoring output when he comes into the NBA. Darren Peterson is the guy that I would say has the highest like ceiling of that group. I think that Cam Boozer has the highest floor. He's going to be just a solid guy for the next decade or so. And Caleb obviously has tremendous upside as well. Not, I would never say anything nice about a UNC player, but I'll let you talk about him when you get to talk here. Yeah, I don't. I mean, it's tough, right? Like DeBonza Peterson, I think are clear cut 1 and 2 for scoring purposes, and I think Boozer and Wilson come in after that. And then there's some more guys that you can bring up if you would like. But I think those 4, yeah, 4, I'm comfortable with 4 there, making those guys stand alone.
Do you feel like there's any other guys that could push Wilson out for you?
Probably not in the scoring standpoint here. If we talk about just actual impact on a basketball court, I'm a big Koa Pete fan. I have been all season long. I think he's going to be one of those like irrational, like I have an irrational fandom for him as he goes into the NBA. It happens every year. We all fall in love with certain prospects. I've been a Koa Pete guy, all season long. Flagler looks awesome. It's like immediate rookie impact. I think those are we're kind of reaching if we it. This could all change depending on where they get drafted to. I don't know what guys
Sure.
like where these teams are going to fall on them. You know what I'm saying? I'm not sure where they're going to be drafted in the league. Like, does Yaxel end up somewhere where he's gonna get immediate minutes on an NBA court because was he 25 now and
Yeah,
was NBA
24, I
ready
think.
last year?
Yeah.
Right, like, he was a guy who was NBA ready last year, but came back for the money and is proving that he's, head and shoulders above most of the people he's on the court with right now. So it's like, he's not 19, but he's a guy that can come into the NBA and make an impact right away, probably. So where does that fall on your list of fantasy rookies if we're doing a dynasty league? Like how early does he go if you're a team that's looking to compete right away in fantasy? Does he fit your roster better than a guy who might need, like a Koa Pete, who might actually need 2 or 3 years to turn into a viable fantasy option?
Yeah, points leagues are interesting because you can kinda throw the efficiency out the window because 'cause you're not concerned with that as you are. I mean, obviously, if a guy is horribly inefficient, he will only be in the league for so long. Now, to be fair, anybody who's taken in the top couple picks is gonna have a long runway to be inefficient, because that's Jalen Green is still a below average efficiency guy, and he's gonna be around probably for many more years
Uh-huh.
and doesn't do a ton else, right? Except for scoring. I think if I was taking if I was drafting dynasty in a points league, team agnostic, right? Like obviously if I'm a championship contender, I think a guy like Boozer makes a lot of sense to take at 1. Even though I think he's worse in points leagues, he's better in categories because he does so much. Um, but I think he'll immediately have a high floor where you can play him and the ceiling is good enough that it makes sense. So I would not be opposed to someone taking Boozer there, but I think in a vacuum, assuming like you're just trying to take the biggest swing, I think it's Peterson first, and then I think it's DeBonsta, Boozer, Wilson. That'd be probably my order. So just a slight change from yours. Peterson, I would like to see handle the ball a little bit more. I know the injury is making that difficult for him. He's mostly been an off-ball scorer. I think he definitely can do the on-ball scoring. I think it's just, some limitations with his hamstring and the leg injuries. I mean, I think if he gets a 90% outcome, I think he's the best player in the draft as a lead guard. I think if Dabonsa gets a 90% outcome, he's also great, but just doesn't have the same general ability across so many different statistical points and also NBA capability. And then Boozer, like I said, high floor. And then Caleb Wilson, I think in points league is great. He's going to get you blocks. He's going to get you rebounds. He's going to score around the basket and potentially could develop into something else. I think we've seen some flashes of some ball skills as time has gone on. So yeah, I think there's guys like Kingston Fleming has an argument. I think Mikal Brown's been great the last couple games. I mean, the guy couldn't shoot the ball to save his life to begin the season, and now is shooting the lights out of the ball. So it wouldn't shock me if Mikal Brown is the fifth pick if he continues at a rate like this. Like this draft is very good. I think if you have an issue where you need a guard, like if you have a roster where a guard makes sense, you got like 7 guys you can take at that 4th pick. I would take Caleb Wilson again in a vacuum, but I think, Fleming's, Wagler, like you said, Mikal Brown's been great. I think Darius Acuff's been really good. He's a little small, but I think can do a lot. And I think we're underrating him because of his size. So yeah, I think there's a lot of options there, but I think it's a clear top 4. I would just have Peterson over DeBonsta as my only change there. Well, I
Yeah,
think you
I s-
oh, go ahead, sorry.
I I said Flagler. In my head, I was saying Fleming. I don't know why I said Flagler hasn't played college basketball in like 3 years.
I thought you meant Wagler. It
No,
just
no,
said
no, no. That's a that, yeah.
Keaton
I in my
Wag
head I was saying Kingston Flemings. I don't know why I said Flagler.
to be
Like
fair, they both start with a K, so that doesn't help. You mix them together, that'd be a great player.
phenomenal player.
If you get the athleticism of Kingston Flemings and all of the ball skills and craftiness that Keaton Wagler has. Not that Flemings doesn't have that, but if you could add
Yeah,
Wagler's as well, oh man, that might be a top 4 pick.
could be very well could be. Also, a guy that we talked about last year on our old podcast that I talked about last year that I had to kind of backtrack because he did not enter the draft. Oh my god, I'm blanking on his first name.
Mums
Mamuselovich.
Momcilovic?
Momcilovic. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm still holding out hope for Momcilovic. All right,
Not in the
6'8",
top
3-point
4.
shooter. Look, he's gonna play in the NBA. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I think he's a flyer guy, right? Like, if you have a spot and you're drafting late, like, he'll probably be a second round pick, but he's just so slow. He's
He
just
is,
he's
but he's 6'8" and he can shoot the hell out of the ball.
Yeah, and if he could just, like, kind of stay in front of people, I mean, he'll play in the NBA. I know that's your guy. I thought you were gonna say LeBaron Philon for a second, who also has been good this year. There's so
Yeah,
many good guards this draft, but I think, again, solid top 4. I would not have a problem if someone took DeBonsta first. I wouldn't have a problem if someone took Peterson first. I think Boozer should only be first in a categories league. There's an argument he should be first in a categories league. And then Wilson, I think, for both is probably 4th,
yeah.
just to finalize that question. But thank you, YKTB. Appreciate the question.
Wait, so you don't think there's a world where Peterson can go first in a categories draft over Boozer?
No, I think
Like where he
I would
should?
I would take Peterson over Boozer in a category, but I think Boozer should only go first in a category, not a
Oh,
points, if that makes
okay.
sense.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. Like, if someone took Boozer, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense in a categories league. If someone took Boozer in a points, I'd say, it's not. I don't think it's incorrect. Obviously, people have different valuations of players, but I personally would not do that. I would only do that in categories, just because the amount of stuff he does, and we've seen at Duke already. So, all right. This is a question from Odd Lobster, great name. What would you do with a core of Cade Cunningham, Jason Tatum, and Jalen Duren as a rebuilding team in a 12-team sleeper lock-in league? So kind of a complex question there. So to add context, he also included he has 3 first-round picks this year. So 3 top 12 picks. I don't know exactly where they are, but 3 top 12 because it's a 12-team league. 2 seconds, so 5 top 24 picks, and he's considering trying to get picks in 27 at the deadline. How do you feel about that team only knowing 3 players in the picks?
So the number one note that I had written down on my sheet here was to sell high on Jason Tatum.
Mm,
And I say that as, somebody who by default has to root for Jason Tatum. This has been well documented between you and I. Jason Tatum, not my favorite basketball player in the world. I think he's a step down from elite. But we're talking fantasy here, and he is an elite fantasy basketball player.
yep.
My fear, though, as we're currently recording on the 16th of February, Boston, I believe, is third in standings in the East. Jaylen Brown is on pace to make at least second team All NBA. I mean, he might be a first team guy. He's playing freaking awesome this year. And they're doing all this without Tatum, who is recovering on an accelerated timetable from a devastating Achilles injury. Do I think he's going to come back and be awful? No. And in no world do I see that being the case. However, is he going to come back and be Jason Tatum that we saw be one of the 5 best players in the NBA over the last 2 seasons, basically? That I feel less strongly about. The Achilles is probably the most detrimental injury any athlete can have, honestly. The ACL has kind of been figured out at this point. We feel pretty good watching people come back from that. The Achilles is a totally different animal. The team is playing awesome without him. I don't imagine that he goes back to the same highs that we saw because the team just doesn't need him to be that again, right? Maybe that will not be the case, and I'll be completely wrong. And, going into the start of next year, it'll be Jason Tatum and everybody else once again, like it was in the past. Not to discredit Jaylen Brown, I get it. But like we've seen what he has done as the leader of a team that is strictly his team. Does that change the way that Jason Tatum plays the game going forward? I would imagine so. I think he probably takes a lesser role than he did in the past. It's not going to be a crazy lesser role, but the basis of this question was saying that he wants to acquire more picks going to the 20, was it the 27 deadline or whatever it was?
Yeah,
What
27
better,
draft going to the deadline.
yeah, exactly. What better way to do that than trade away Jason Tatum? You haven't had him at all this year, so your roster's not going to look any different. You're going to have draft picks to play with going forward, and you have a guy who's 22 and 24 as the core of your team. Maybe you package a couple of these together and you move up in this year's draft to get one of those top 4 guys we just talked about. You add Boozer to that team, you add DeBonsta, whoever you want, if at all possible, and then you're rocking and rolling going forward. Maybe you don't want to do that. That's totally fine. Um, if you feel like shipping off the 2 best players on the hottest team in the Eastern Conference, then by all means, go ahead and do that. That would not be my recommendation. I would be much more comfortable shipping off Jason Tatum coming off an Achilles and recouping as much as you possibly can for that man.
Okay. Yeah, interesting take. I hadn't really thought about what the Celtics would look like when he gets back, right? Is it slightly more utilitarian and they kind of share the ball? I mean, they've always shared the ball, kind of your turn, my turn, but he was the guy, right? Like, 'cause let's all be honest, he was the guy. Jaylen Brown has had his moments, but Jason Tatum was the guy. But does that split a little bit more, especially from like a coaching standpoint, to keep like both those guys happy? Do you kind of tell them to split it a little bit more? It's an interesting, it very possibly could happen. I will say if you don't do anything, you have a great team. You've
Yeah.
got you got a top like 7 guy. I think Cade, for most people, I mean, for everybody pretty much top 10, but for most people, top 7-ish player. Jason Tatum, top 20 guy, right? With the injury. I think that's kind of where a lot of people put him. And then Duran, top 40 guy. That's super young, right? Yeah, next year you'll be fine. I think there's an argument that you should just package your picks to get as many of the high end of the first round this year as possible. If you have, what was it, 3 first and 2 seconds this year, like, if those are mid first, I would try to get those to be top 3 picks, specifically top 2 if it's a category league, because I think Boozer and Peterson are, that good for category leagues. That would be something I would consider. Now, obviously, if one of those is already in there, then, there I guess you could try to move the other ones plus the seconds to get that. I would also say I did my rankings. I talked about this with you, Bentley. I published a top 300 rankings. I have Jason Tatum at 16th. That's where I put him, as a dynasty asset. I have Peterson and Boozer the next 2 behind him. I included about 10 prospects in it that I think will be top 300 assets when they get drafted, and maybe more as time goes by. But that's what I have. So, like, if to follow your logic, if you believe that to be the case, I would try to trade Jason Tatum for the first pick or the second pick, knowing you're going to get one of those two guys. Uh, Especially if you're like, I want to go young. Jason Tatum's 28; he'll be 29. Near the end of next year. You wanna have everybody be, like, 25 and under, all your best players. Like, I think there's an argument to be made there, and I wouldn't be opposed to someone doing that if they really felt like that made sense. Obviously, we don't know the rest of your roster. The rest of your roster may be really old or, but even if you don't trade up, you'll have 3 firsts and 2 seconds. If you could trade Tatum for the first or second pick, that means you're bringing in 6 rookies. Your team's incredibly young at that point. You probably want to do that in that situation if you're gonna use all those picks. It's like you're like OKC, you can only do so much with all those picks, so if you're gonna take them, you have to build a team that makes sense with them. If you're not going to take all those picks, you need to find ways to either move up or move to a different year, right? You just can't take you can't have depending on how big your rosters are, you can't have all these people, uh, because it just doesn't make a lot of sense, right? And there's also roster caps, obviously. So if someone was to offer me Tatum for the first pick, I would think that's a fair trade for both sides, and it's context dependent. The hard part I will say about that is that if you have Tatum, the person who has the first pick is likely not good unless they traded it away at some point in the past, right? Do they want Tatum to be good? Like, I guess if they're like, I want to be good next year right away, that's like the only way you could kind of make that trade happen. If they're like, I'm still not going to be good enough, they may feel that way. So they want to keep their pick. That's kind of the hard part of, like, if you tried to make that trade, it may be difficult. Now, if you have a team that is competing right now who also has the first pick, they might be like, well, I'm going to compete again next year and I'm just going to add Tatum to that. I think you could probably do that trade, especially a team that's kind of in the middle of the road and Tatum would push them over next year. I think there's an option there. So I would look into that. I wouldn't move Cade or Duran unless you got premium, especially Cade. I mean, there's like almost no one I would trade Cade for that anyone would want to trade that's reasonable. Like Cooper Flag is like the one guy I would consider straight up, and even that, like, pick your poison, I guess. But yeah, I wouldn't mess with those other two guys. They'll grow together too, which is nice. You'll kind of they I believe they have a lot of plus, when they play together, their stats kind of go up together. I think I looked at that. You see that a lot in a DFS where they're like, when these guys play together, they get this many points per minute. So I wouldn't touch the Pistons guys. If you wanted to move Tatum, I would try to move him for a high end pick this year. I would not try to move him for 27. Obviously, if you can get the first pick at 27, that's great, but there's no guarantee that the pick you get in 27 is going to be the first pick. 26, you can almost guarantee that. So that's what I would be looking for, a top 2 pick, or move him for, an Almond Thompson, a Scotty Barnes. Again, don't know the context of your league, but that's kind of the territory Tatum is in. So if you're looking to get a little younger, those guys are an option as well. Anything else on that?
Yes. So he mentions in his question that he has 3 first round picks already this year and 2 second rounders.
Yeah.
He also says probably looking to round out the team. Well, you've got everything you need right there to round out your team. I mean, the draft this year is so good that each of those first 3 round picks are going to be valuable in and of themselves, right? So if you don't want to move on from any of your guys, Tatum, Cade, or Duran, like, you have those 3 first round picks, you can just round out your team that way. Again, without knowing, how many roster spots you guys have or whatever. the ability that you have with 3 first round picks, like, you could trade all 3 of those and try to move up to 1, or you could trade all 3 of those and go get, one of the guys Ryan just mentioned, Scotty, Amen, like, a high end fantasy basketball player just with those 3 first round picks. So it's like you have a ton of flexibility in this position, whether you take my stance of I would move on from Tatum, or you want to keep him and kind of use your picks to round out your team in that aspect. Like, there's so many different ways for you to go with it. It's just whether you want to take the big swing to move up to the 1 spot this year, or even the 2 spot this year with the ammunition you have, or you want to hold pat with the current rosters and just use those picks to add other players that are already in the league. I mean, I'm sure there's some young guys, right, in the league now that, second year, third year guys or whatever that maybe underperforming, but you have a high grade on that you can move a first round pick for like an unproven player coming into the league this year. The possibility is really endless just because of having 3 first round picks already in this year's draft, which, I mean, kudos to you. You figured something out there. I wish I could get my league to ship me 3 first round picks. I would love that.
Yeah, I think it's a good spot. Is optionality is really high. I agree with that. Like we and I always in our previous pod where we just talked about the NBA, we talked a lot about building a team that gives you options, and I think that applies in dynasty leagues as well, right? Putting yourself in a situation to be able to do a lot of different things allows you to take advantage of situations that arise. So if a team is collapsing upon itself, you could take advantage of that in the situation. If a team is excelling, if they're the Atlanta Hawks getting to the Eastern Conference Finals and you're like, I don't actually think they're that good, you could, take advantage of those situations, right? People who are overestimating or underestimating the quality of their team, you're able to exploit that. So I think you're in a good spot. And if you're just trying to round out your team because your depth is so bad, I agree. 3 top 12 picks in 2 years, you're going to have, a perfectly deep roster with like, even if you keep Tatum, everyone will be 30 or he'll be 30. Everyone else is 25 or younger, I believe, at that point. And your roster kind of grows together. So you have a lot of options. Could go all in, could do OKC where you just trade back and get even more. Like you could literally do anything. Uh, if I saw the rest of your roster, we could get more info. I'm an advocate of trying to get a top 2 pick this year. I think it is that valuable. So if your 3 first are all mid and late, I would try and package maybe 2 first and the seconds to move up, into the top 2 if you can, or Tatum for that. Like I would advocate for that, but the options are good. I agree with Bentley that being able to do a lot of things. Clearly a talented general manager. I think New Orleans could use someone like you if they're struggling in real life with that.
Well, we don't know what kind of protections he's got on these 3 first round picks.
Yeah, yeah, they're completely unprotected for. I guess maybe you could trade one for Derek Queen just to really dig into this metaphor a little more.
Not my
Um,
Dairy Queen.
all right, so I guess that leads the following question for the sleeper lock-in format. Someone asked, let me get their name real fast because I didn't write it down. The sleeper lock-in format. Who wrote that? That was okay. Kind ad 5354. I love these pre-made Reddit usernames when you don't want to make one and they give you like a 2 words and a bunch of numbers. That's what mine is. I kind of
Same.
it gets some flavor. Does the sleeper lock-in format change player rankings? Um, how you feel about that, Billy? Would you evaluate in Dynasty? It's even more interesting, right? Because obviously you have them for forever or salary, depending on your league. But would you value someone differently based off that format where you can lock them in and then still move people around?
It does change the rankings. However, I don't think it changes the top, like, 40 rankings. Those are guys that are just gonna be locked in, set it and forget it. Well, I guess locked in at this point is not the correct verbiage, but you know what I'm saying. Those are
Yeah,
those are the guys you're rostering and playing no matter what, unless they have some, like, freaky, the Jokic 30-20-20 game, and then you lock it in. But it's the guys at the end of the bench. It's your I Peyton Pritchard is the first one coming to mind, and he's not even like an end of the bench guy. Your Will Riley's playing in Washington, having a 27-point night. You're like, well, I need to lock that. So does it change your rankings? Yeah, you're going to more highly rank the players who have the higher upside given their week's matchup, right? If it's somebody who doesn't score a bunch, but they're playing the New Orleans Pelicans who play no fucking defense at all, maybe you're going to value that player higher than somebody who's playing Oklahoma City and Minnesota this week because they're on a West Coast swing, right? Uh, so the rankings of the players, it does change, but it's not going to be your superstar players that are affected as much by this sleeper lock-in. It's going to be your guys that you have to that like you're picking up off the waiver wire or you drafted at the end of your draft kind of deal. The players that have a little more volatility to them, I think, get ranked differently with this format.
Yeah, I think that's probably where I am as well. I think we talked a little bit about this before the pod, but I think what it does is it makes high floor guys worse. Your Royce O'Neals, your Dorian Finney-Smiths. Well, to be fair, DFS not a high floor guy right now because he's coming back from injury. Hasn't really done much. But typically those types of guys, right? Uh, the guys who don't pop very much, they're just like I'm going to get you 10. I'm gonna get you a couple rebounds and like 2 assists, and that's like every night, right? They're there every night. It's the guys who are like they get enough shots up, but they need those like 70% shooting nights to really pop, but they have one like a week. Those guys become a lot more valuable because you can play them hypothetically every game and hope they pop. I brought up like Colin Sexton, I think is like a good example of this. I think any type of like microwave scorer, Cam Thomas, even as much as I think Cam Thomas is a hard watch sometimes, like he will just drop like 35. So those types of guys become more valuable, but their floor also bottoms out. Like there's a chance they don't do anything all week. But I think most NBA players, most top 200 NBA players have a good game once a week, right? Like they have a serviceable game once a week. I think as a Rockets fan, I think of like Jabari Smith Jr., right? Jabari Smith Jr. will have some 17, 10, 2 blocks, a steal, and 3 assist games. And you're like, oh, I locked that in. And then he'll have like 8, 5, and 2. But he'll have one of those every week, and then maybe he'll have like one in the middle. But you can kind of figure it out. When he goes over 20, you feel good. So the guys that have the minutes, they have the usage potential. They get enough shots up. They get enough time on the ball. I think those guys get a decent increase. I don't think it's a huge increase, but I think those guys who are high floor that you rely on every night just to get you points, I don't think they're as valuable when you can lock them in and take them out and stuff like that. Doesn't mean they're unrostered. Well, they're just not as valuable. So sorry, Royce O'Neal and those guys. Najee Marshall, who actually does pop occasionally. He's one of the better versions of those types of players. But yeah, those guys
PJ
dropped down a little bit.
Washington, Grayson Allen.
Yeah, Colin Gillespie, and those are probably high-end versions of those players, so those are pretty good. But yeah, that's kinda how I look at it. Anything else on that?
No, I think I'm good.
Alright. We got 2 different questions that we'll address kind of at the same time, but I'll start with the first one. It says, "Buy lows as a rebuilding team and what you'd pay could be pickups or trade targets." This guy says, "My league is a points league, if that helps." And then I shamelessly plugged my Substack, which I wrote an article about rebuilding teams and who they should target. And to be specific, that is Substack, allindynasty.substack.com, just to be very specific, in case you want to see that article. But Bentley, you have anybody that you think right now has maybe depressed value that you would pick up, and what would you give up for a player like that?
So I got a guy that I'm thinking of that is extremely well known, super duper popular NBA player. And this is a person who, if you were to add him to your roster, or let me phrase it this way, this is a very roster dependent move. But I think that you could get this player for fairly cheap given their history. I think Joel Embiid is an underappreciated fantasy asset at this moment. He's a guy who is no longer expected to carry the load for Philadelphia, but he's a guy that on any given night could give you 30 and 12 because he feels pretty good. You know, they play in a depreciated East where the best rim protector slash big man defender is like Bam Adebayo, I think,
Yeah,
is
Mitchell
like,
Robinson,
yeah, Mitchell but he's like,
Jared Allen.
let me, let me not say anything bad about Mitchell Robinson. He's actually been really good.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, Jared Allen, you know, like, but he's not. And well, he never plays Jokic anyways because he always runs through that matchup. But he doesn't play in a Western Conference where he's expected to play against stout defenses and stout front lines all the time, at least at a higher clip than he would in the East. So that is just like one that kind of jumped out to me. I was looking at some rankings earlier. They had him ranked 108th. Now that was in Dynasty, so I get it, like his age. And that's why I said it's kind of situationally dependent. But if you're a team who is looking to make a playoff push this year, I think that's a guy with a lot of high variance opportunities there. He's not going to give you 30 and 12 every single night, but the nights that he plays and he plays decent minutes, he's more often than not going to score and get a lot of rebounds. And every once in a while, he'll get you some stocks too. Like that defensive prowess has not just gone away because he can't move with both feet now, but like he's still a smart player. His positioning is still pretty good, and his offensive touch is still there. He just does everything as like half a step to a full step slower than he did in the past. But what do they always say, Ryan? You can't teach 7'3", 280 pounds. Like
yeah,
you,
with some
you
ball
cannot
skills.
learn that. Yeah. So that's just one that kind of jumped out to me. I'm sure you probably have others, and we can get to this list of guys that they asked us about.
Yeah, I have Joel Embiid at 92 on my ranking, just inside the top 100. I think definitely if you're trying to win now, he's probably a guy that owners are scared to own because you don't know when he's going to play. Obviously, he's been great since he's been playing, but like the history's there, right? Like it's understandable to be scared. So yeah, if you could trade like a top 150 guy, to get him, like, and you're trying to win now, I'll give you some names, and you tell me if you would trade Joel Embiid. You're a winning team. We'll just do that scenario. You're a winning team. You're you're like third. You're trying to push to to win the championship, right? I'm gonna throw some names at you. You tell me if you would trade this guy. Would you trade Anthony Black for Joel Embiid?
Oh, come on. You know, that's unfair. That's unfair. I would trade anything for Anthony Black.
Okay, all right.
I'm a day one Anthony Black guy. You know this.
But you're trying to win right now, and maybe Anthony Black is superfluous to your winning right now. But okay.
Also, as I'm looking at this, I just realized that Garrick sent me a trade request in our league.
He sends me a trade request every night. So we're
He
gonna
sent
bring him
me
on the pod to go over his trade request. I think it'd be great.
please because it's asinine.
Okay, here's another player. Would you trade Trey Johnson, Washington rookie, for Joel Embiid?
Mm,
Assuming you're trying to push to win a championship right now.
Yeah, if I'm trying to push to win a championship, I would do that trade.
Okay.
Anthony Black, for the record, I would not trade Anthony Black for Joel Embiid. For the record.
Okay. I'm moving up my list, so these guys are higher ranking as we go. see where your threshold is. Would you
Wait, hold
trade?
on. You have hold on. That means you have Trey Johnson above Anthony Black on your dynasty
Yeah,
ranking?
they're very close to be fair, but yes.
Hater, bro.
Would you trade Ryan Rollins to get to Joel Embiid? A little older player, not much older. He's
Yeah.
23, but uh he's
Yeah, I would do that trade.
okay. All right. Moving up a little bit. Would you trade Colin Murray Boyles for Joel Embiid? Right, another young guy, rookie. You're trying to win now. Do you give up the potential of CMB for Joel Embiid?
Man. Boy, that's tough.
Are you asking for?
I am gonna say no
Okay.
because I think that CB plays more in the second half of the season.
Okay. Yeah, and a lot longer, probably the rest of his career.
Well, yeah, obviously that, but I'd like this
We
year.
hope so.
Yeah, yeah, God, we hope so.
I'll do one more. Would you trade? I'm not thinking of an older player. Would you trade Michael Porter Jr., not super old but older, for
Yeah,
Joel Embiid?
man, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
I would probably say yes. Wow, man, I don't know, maybe not. Hmm, no. Actually, I take that back. I would. Here's why. Michael Porter Jr. did not get traded at the deadline.
Right.
His back might get re-aggravated in the second half of the year. He might not play again.
Right. So if you are a team trying to win right now, you probably want Embiid to win this year and maybe next, and hope you get like 3 you hope you get 3 years out of him, and then, uh, you're super happy at that point. Okay, I mean, I think that's fair. Okay, you wanna hear my list of people I wrote specifically for rebuilding teams? Because this I changed the question to you to but specifically as rebuilding teams. These are the people I put: Walker Kessler. I think, if you're rebuilding, you're not trying to win right now, Walker Kessler's a great buy low. I think I have Walker Kessler in the 60s in my ranking. Where did I actually finish with him at? I had a 63. If you could trade you know, someone that is, in the top 100, I think a lot of people have him significantly lower. I've seen some rankings of Walker Kessler in the hundreds. I completely disagree with that from a fantasy perspective. He's great in fantasy, especially if you're building a team that's gonna punt certain categories that Kessler's not great at. But he's even shot some threes at the beginning of the year, like low volume, but, shot well. So, if you could trade like Devin Vassell, Claxton, Jordan Poole, Jabari Smith, kind of like in that territory of player for Walker Kessler, I'd be happy to do that. Scoot Henderson's another guy I put as a buy low for rebuilding teams. He just came back, so that might be fleeting. You're gonna have to do it quickly if he starts playing well. I still believe that he can do it. There's some issues with the amount of guards they have in Portland, but I don't think Drew Holiday is going to be there forever, and I don't think Dame will obviously be there forever. Both those guys are older. AJ Mitchell, I think if you're rebuilding AJ Mitchell, OKC is going to have a roster crunch at some point. They're going to have to move off of guys. They can't afford to keep everybody. They have 3 guys on max deals. AJ Mitchell's on an extremely team friendly deal for the next couple of years. He will be either their starting 2 or he'll be their off the bench scorer, and they'll need that. And he'll play with J Dub and SGA in certain rotations, but he will be their probably many lineups. He'll be their second best player, and I expect him to just increase in minutes as time goes by. And I have him in my top 100. So if you can, again, trade like a top 150 guy for him, I think that's reasonable. Dylan Harper, people are still sleeping on Dylan Harper. I say this all the time. And I think the main reason is because Khan, Flag, Edgecombe, Queen, Fears, Cedric Coward, all these guys have had pretty good starts. Some have had incredible starts, Flag and Khan to be specific. I still believe Dylan Harper is the second best rookie in this class. He just needs some time. It's context dependent, right? His team has some minutes there. So I would be looking to get Harper. If you could trade like a top 60 asset for Harper, I have Harper at 29, I believe, on my rankings. Yeah, 29. So if you could trade like a Zion or a John Morant to a winning team, right? Those types of guys, Okongwu, Anunoby, kind of in that territory. I'd be happy to do that as your rebuilding team. I think this is the cheapest Harper will ever be. He's likely only going to get more expensive. And then I also threw in Jaden Ivey as a now that he's with Chicago. I wrote this before he got traded, but the problem is Chicago has a million guards now. But I do think Jaden Ivey is going to get the chance to prove himself. But if you want to buy him low, now's the only time. He's either going to be a buy low or a never buy or a buy too high, right? Like those are his options. Right now is the only buy low. He's either going to be not rosterable very soon or he's going to be too expensive because he'll do well enough in Chicago. And as he's coming back from injury, this is the time to buy low. So those are guys I wrote as targets. Anybody else for a rebuilding team that you would specifically target?
Man, for rebuilding team.
That's tough. That's what I like thinking about though. Like, what am I doing when I'm not very good? That's how you
Yeah.
win.
Yeah. Well, I would have said before the year started Denny Optia, but the cat's out of the bag there. That is
Yeah.
quite obvious. I think. Oh, so there's a guy that you could probably buy for really low right now, Khalil Ware in Miami. He's a guy who started out the year. Well, you shook your head there a little bit. Let me tell you why. He's a guy who they cannot figure out the minutes for this guy, but he's very obviously shown his ability to play in the NBA. So either Miami is going to figure out the minutes and the way to play him alongside Bam, or he won't be on that team and he'll be on another roster. and he will play minutes on that other team. I'm not sure where that is. My assumption is that it will be in Miami, unless he's in some sort of package deal in the offseason for Giannis. Chloe Ware, a guy that I think is very buy low potential at the moment. Like I said, he can play in the NBA. He's shown it. He's proved it. He was starting at the beginning of the season. Then they brought him off the bench and they started him again. He's a guy I think that is valuable, especially in a categories league, probably more so categories than in a straight points league. But that's somebody, if you're looking to buy super low on a guy who personally I believe in, then Khalil Ware might be someone for you. Let's see.
I actually don't disagree with you. I checked it because I used in the pod I did by myself right before this. I used a Cork consensus. We talked about that. They aggregate what people think about players, right? From a dynasty rankings perspective, they have Ware at 93, and I have him at 80. So there's a little bit of a difference there. And I think in the top 100, the players are like the separation of the players is larger.
Yeah.
So 93 to 80 is a bigger jump than 220 to 240, right? Like those guys are more similar at the lower ends are more similar. So I agree. I still think, if you can get Ware for a top 120 guy that's playing right now, 130 guy, like I agree. It's all always context dependent. But if you're rebuilding, that guy's got all the skill in the world. He was in a bad spot his freshman year, at Oregon, and then went to Indiana, right? Not the other way
Yeah.
around.
Correct.
And he's shown a lot. I agree, category leagues, he has a lot of potential to affect a lot of different things. Just in Miami, the Bam situation makes things weird for people, and also you have to be in the right headspace to play in Miami, and that takes some time. If he gets in that right headspace, incredible buy. He could be a top 50 asset, right? If everything goes well, that would not shock me. So I agree with you.
Is another name on the list. This was included in the question. Shouted out the guy who asked us this one yet. But on the list of guys to buy low, maybe even lower than Khalil Ware because he's not playing at all. Derek Lively,
Uh-huh.
that's a dude who that I like, and I know that you like Derek Lively. He's going to be playing alongside. Well, he's going to be on a roster alongside Cooper Flag for a really long time. Hopefully, he
Yeah.
will play. He's had some real injury concerns at the beginning of his career, but he's a dude who's immensely talented, stud on the defensive end of the ball of the court, and like you stated, was it 2 years ago? Has a little more wiggle than people expect.
Yeah.
Not the most like hard hitting names, but that's kind of what you're looking for if you're a team who's rebuilding in fantasy. You're looking around the fringes, guys that are going to make a difference on your roster when you're lacking superstars. So Derek Lively, for my money, pretty good buy low candidate.
Yeah, I agree. I still have a lot of Derek Lively stock. Obviously, the injuries have made things tough for him, so I do think he's a buy low just from that. Let's see where he ranks. I just want to check real fast. Yeah, 131 is where people have him. Um, I have him at 115, so slightly higher than where the consensus is. I still like him quite a bit. Like I said, if you could trade like a Josh Hart for him, somewhere in that territory, Kobe White, especially Kobe White, I think is a sell high if you can get away with it. Daniel Gafford, if you could somehow get away with that. Gobert, if you're rebuilding, right? He's older. He's better now, but he's like 11 years older. Guys like that, try to get into like the 150s if you can do it. It might be tough, but I agree with you. I have a lot of stock, and he's currently injured, so I think he's definitely a buy low. All right, you want to speed run these other guys? Another person asked us. Let me get his name. This is a real name, I believe. Char Nizelson, I believe, is. Don't 100% know what that means, but some type of Pokemon mixed with something else. I'm not sure, but he brought up, and we already talked about some of them, but dynasty buy lows like Ja, Darius Garland, Derek Lively, Cat Kessler, and the price is worth paying for them. So we already talked about Lively. We already talked about Kessler. Let's do a quick one on Ja. What's the best asset you would give up for Ja? Because I think he's the most could be anywhere for anybody at this point.
All right, like, I'm just going to use my roster as kind of a baseline here.
Sure. Yep.
What is the best thing that I would give up for John Morant? Ryan Dunn?
Ooh. Uh,
I mean, I would. No, I would give up. It's not gonna be somebody good.
Yeah.
Like, I probably give up Grady Dick and, like, the opportunity for a future there. You're way more delved into, like, the actual rankings than I am, like, where these guys are slotted out. I've never been a jaw guy, going all the way back to college. I was not anyone whose greatest asset is throwing their body violently into very tall men who are trying to stop his, um, you know, attempts at scoring around the rim. That's the only thing they do at an elite level.
Yep.
I'm out on that. He's never been somebody who really moved the needle for me. So I would not. I would give up far less than maybe Grizzlies fan would. But you know, I throw emotion far more into these things than do other people. You know, and it kind of bites me in the ass every once in a while. But yeah, I'm not. I wouldn't trade anything for John Morant, honestly. It would have to be a fleecing. There's no way that I'm giving up any asset of value to bring Ja Morant onto my roster because one, I don't know if he's going to play, and two, when he does play, he's one of the least efficient, high volume guys in the NBA, and he has been for 2 years. Like I don't know where. I mean, I do know where he went. He got his head all twisted around and then got injured, and he's injured again. But the guy who
Yep.
was supposed to be the next great superstar of this league, like that guy's gone. The league has moved beyond John Morant, in my opinion.
Yeah, as a premium asset, I agree with you. I'm not as low as you are about it, but I would definitely give up Grady Dick for John Morant. I want to say, I want to say that. I know you said you would too, but that is definitely a fleecing in my opinion. I have John Morant at 65, but to me the arrow is pointing down. Uh, I don't feel great even at 65. That's like a legacy, option. What I will say is in court consensus, he's at 43. So I'm not sure he is a buy low based off that, right? If the average person thinks he's in the top 50, I'm not sure you can get him for anything reasonable. Now, you might, if you can, I'd be in like the Peyton Pritchard, Keegan Murray, Nas Reed, someone like that, you know, just fine, top 100, low end. But if the person in your league thinks he's a top 40 or 50 player, like you're not getting him for that. So and if I own him, I'm probably holding him because you just hope he gets it back, right? So if you really honestly believe he can get it back, pay the top 60 price, and you may be able to get him. But I would not do that personally. He looks way less explosive. And that's kind of his thing. His 3-point shooting looks somehow worse when he does play. He looks disinterested, and maybe he gets interested again, and the explosiveness comes back. Maybe that's part of the issue. But like, that's a huge risk, right? It ain't happening this year. Is it going to happen next year? Is it happening in the off season? Like, yeah, I don't know. He's just. I'd be too scared to buy low on him personally, if you could even do it, which I don't really think it's an option based off the consensus rankings there. Darius Garland. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
One more thing on Ja. He is this year in 20 games, he shot 23% from three and is shooting 31% from three for his career.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned the explosiveness being gone. I talked about his greatest asset being his downhill going and throwing his body violently at the rim, and he doesn't do that anymore. What is there to buy low on? I mean, I would not have him rostered. There's just so many other people I'd rather have than Ja Morant in real life NBA and in fantasy.
Yeah,
But
huge variables, massive variables, right? Like, if he can be 80%, 90% of what he once was, then great, he is a buy low, right? But I I don't see that. Uh, I hope I'm wrong for his sake, and for
sure,
Memphis's sake, I guess. But I don't see it. I do not think that's a buy low. All right, Darius Garland. How do you feel about his role in OKC? Seems like they're looking at him as maybe a new guy, bring in the new era. Kawhi, who knows if he'll be there with everything going on.
yeah, Clippers, not OKC.
Oh, sorry, Clippers. Yes, I don't know why
I
I
was
said
gonna
OKC.
say his role in OKC is
Kawhi
much
is
more
in OKC now.
a lot of trees in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So this is like the Anthony Black question. I'm a sucker for Darius Garland. Basically, since he came into the league, one of my all time, I say all time, like one of my active favorite players to watch. The speed at which he plays with, his change of pace is awesome. I get that he's little, so that is, detrimental. And now I push back on the injury prone thing because he has like weird injuries. Like he
Uh,
stubs a toe and then like he breaks an orbital bone. It's like if you take out all the chronic injuries with Joel Embiid, it's kind of like that, like he has Bell's palsy and then like he has to wear the
yeah.
Batman mask because he got poked in the eye. It's like it's just freaky stuff. It's like he's a Major League Baseball pitcher who would like just gets hurt in the most random ways. But when he
Yeah.
plays, I love Darius Garland. When he plays, he's absolutely one of my favorite guys in the entire NBA. So I'm very high on his future with the Clippers because it's obvious that they are making him a part of their future plans, right? Post Kawhi, probably what that team looks like. It's going to be, he comes in as their second best player, right? Like already, it's Kawhi and then Darius Garland is the next dude in line. Um, yeah, depending on how you feel about Benedict Mathurin, but I think that most people would agree that Darius Garland is better than Benedict Mathurin. So I don't even think he's a buy low, right? This is kind of what we're doing, buy lows. I don't see him as a buy low because I so value him very highly in the league. But if you have the opportunity to buy a low on him, then absolutely, I say go for it. It's all it's depending on your league and how the people within there view him. But I say if you have an opportunity to bring in Darius Garland, I would be all in favor of that because he's going to be the starting point guard on a team who's looking to make the playoffs in the West. They have one of the 5 best players in the world right now going, and he's going to be the complementary part. He's going to be the guy who kind of drives the car for them going down the stretch of the season.
Yeah, I actually do think he's a buy low. Again, using consensus rankings versus my own, because that's the easy way for me to do that. He's 53 on consensus rankings. I have him at 36, which is significantly higher for top 50, right?
Yeah.
So I do think he's a buy low. I would happily trade someone around 55 for him. The guys I have around 55, Brandon Miller, gladly trade Brandon Miller, Steph Curry, like kind of a middle first round pick this year. I have those guys in that range. Anthony Davis, Zubats, Kongwu, Stephon Castle, James Harden, funnily enough, all in that range. Would happily trade those guys for Darius Garland. Let me ask you the guys who are near him on the consensus rankings to see what you think. Would you trade Pascal Siakam for Darius Garland straight up?
Man, that is difficult. Age, category versus points. If it's a category league, I probably keep Siakam. If it's a points, man, even if it's a points league, I probably. But then you got to factor in, am I trying to win this year? Because how much is Pascal Siakam going to play in the back half of the season? Because they are for sure taking in Indiana and they're not taking in LA. I think if you're in a redraft league, you keep Siakam, and if you're in a dynasty league, you do the trade for Garland.
Yeah, so in points, they're very close, and in category, Siakam is significantly higher.
Yeah.
So for categories, let me correct what I said because I rank categories. I have him 36. I've Garland 36. He's 69 in categories on the consensus rankings, which I think is way too low. So now
Yeah.
we're talking Shaden Sharp, Ryan Rollins. Funnily enough, John Morant is one above him. Joel Embiid, Zion, Zubats, Derek White. I would trade basically every single one of those people for Darius Garland. um, Reed Shepherd is above him. I would punt Reed Shepherd into the sun before, uh, and I'm a Rockets fan, and I think Reed Shepherd's fine, but
Yeah.
if someone offered me that, I would immediately, I'd hit accept before they could back out. Brandon Ingram's above him. Anthony Davis is above him. Derek Queen is above him, which I don't get. Stephon Castle, Brandon Miller, like James Harden. I would happily trade James Harden for Darius Garland, especially if you're rebuilding.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
all day. Even if you're just like transitioning to rebuilding. You don't have to be doing a full rebuild, just like a transition, or you're trying to get a little younger. So I do agree that Garland's a great buy low. Looking for guys in the top 60 to 75 to get him, especially with the consensus ranking being as low as it is. I have him at 36. There's a 30 spot difference, a huge difference. So definitely a buy signal. And then last but not least, your favorite player, Carl Anthony Towns. Uh, I guess I'll lead with where I have them and where they are on the consensus so you have an idea. I have them at 32, still very high. He's such a unique player. He's 38 in the consensus ranking, so we're very close. We're six off from each other. So to me, that indicates he's about where I think he should be. But if you're in a league where maybe people don't like the way he plays, or uh, they're scared the Knicks are going to move off of him at some point, like, I'm not really sure what the logic is that he's a buy low. But if I could get him for a top 50 asset, I would happily do it. Um, and that looks like, again, Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant, a middle first round pick, Desmond Bain, Sabonis, Markkanen, Hero, Jalen Brown, again in categories. Because again, you get lethal 3-point shooter at his position, which is so unique. There's not very many guys who can do that. He rebounds the ball well enough, does a little bit of everything. Obviously, the defensive stats you'd like to see a little bit more, but yeah, I
So
happily do that.
yeah, Cat for me. So I'm cool having him at, what did you say,
I have
32?
him at 32. He's 36 at the consensus,
Yeah,
or
I mean
38.
that's
38.
that seems to kind of be where he belongs. However, I would have the caveat that you put in with John Morant, where the arrow is not pointing, like the arrow is pointing down, right? He's having his worst statistical season since he was a rookie in terms of scoring, all the counting stats, right? Rebounds, assists, points combined. His rebounding is, it's not down like an exorbitant amount, but his points are down, his assists are down. He's not good on defense. Now, how much of that is because they have a new coaching staff in and Mike Brown, let's face it, is kind of an archaic style coach in the NBA, based off of today's coaching environment. Maybe it's just like a one-off year and they'll get it figured out going into next year. But we're what, almost 60 games in at this point, and we Cat is still not back to the level that he was even at last year. He's obviously a very valuable player to the Knicks and to any fantasy franchise that has him on the roster. So I'm not saying if you have the opportunity to acquire him not to do that. I would just be a little more hesitant. Like, I would much rather, the list that we have here with the question that was posed to us was Ja, Garland, Lively, Cat, Kessler. Like, those are, they say etc., but those are the guys we have. I'd rather have every single one of those guys not named John Morant on my roster instead of Cat, just based off of age, output, all of the things like that. Cat, very valuable, awesome player, like phenomenally talented offensive player. It's not a guy that I'm putting high on my wish list of trade candidates. If it's a guy you drafted, you keep him, absolutely. But like, if I'm having to give up assets to bring in Cat, I think that something has probably gone wrong on my roster, or I'm giving up a bunch of young guys because I think I can make a playoff push and win a championship this year or next year.
Yeah, I think if you're definitely if you're rebuilding, I don't think he makes a ton of sense. I think he's a sell if I'm rebuilding. But if you can get him for a top 50 guy, like I said, I think he's a buy. Still a great offensive option. Gives you so many offensive stats, 3-pointers made, just points. Great rebounder. His advanced stats are still very good. His defensive stats are horrible, but we know that you're not going to get much from him. But if you're building a team that is focused on the offensive side of the ball, I think he makes sense. I just don't really know if he's a buy low. So I guess that's kind of my thought process there. Obviously, your league, you may just get someone who hates him, but if someone hates him, are you going to be the person giving the best offer? Probably not. But yeah, like I said, if you can get him for a top 50 to 60 guy, then I would happily do it, assuming you're trying to win in the next 3. He's 30. Like, I feel old saying he's 30. Like, every time I look at that, I'm like, there's no way he's 30, and then he is. He's same with Siakam. When I was doing my rankings, I'm like, man, Siakam was like, there were only 2 older players above Siakam in my ranking, which is
Yeah.
crazy. Like, I forget how old, like not that they're ancient, but like they're getting old, and that obviously affects how long they're gonna be competitive. So yeah, I don't know if it's a buy low signal. Um, all right. Here's a I kind of will let you answer this one because you said you had a story for it, but we got this question from, let me say their name. Aggravating Film 962, another great Reddit name there. They said, is it okay to mention a player in the chat that has been dropped and is on the waiver wire? And their logic basically is that some owners are more engaged, pay attention to the league, they pay attention to who gets dropped, they look at the waiver wire. Some are not as engaged. They check once a week, maybe they set their lineup, they don't look until they have to do that again, right? Their argument is that if people go and mention a player in the chat to let everybody know that someone was dropped, that harms the people who are trying harder and helps the people who are not trying as hard or not as engaged. But you said you had a story. I think that sort of answers the question, so I'll let you go for it.
Right. So it is obviously a little different. My story is from fantasy football. Similar situation though, right? I'll preface this by just answering the question straight up. Let everybody do their own research. If somebody gets dropped, that's like, and you don't see it, that's on you. Basketball's a long season. You have plenty of opportunity to look at the waiver wires and see who's available and see who isn't. I don't think anybody should ever really be calling it out. Like if you want to say to one person, like, hey, like, did you see who just got dropped? You should go check it out. Like, that's totally fine. I don't think you should put it in the chat to the entire league. They're like, oh my God, why did you just drop such a coward? What happened? I don't understand. Like, why would you do that? That makes no sense to me. A little like lack of competitiveness there, in my opinion, but whatever. To each league their own. If that's kind of the temperature of the room within your league, then I mean, I guess it's fine. It's not something that I would ever do, but that's just me. So, story, playing a keeper league in fantasy. Keepers are based off of average draft position from the previous year, except for guys that you pick up off of waiver wires. So we're getting to the tail end of last year. It's playoff time already. So everybody's playoff rosters are pretty much set. You can still add and drop guys throughout the week or whatever. Well, somebody dropped Jamar Chase because was it Jamar Chase? Had to be Jamar Chase. Yeah. Right? Oh my God, I'm blanking on it now. Hold on, I can look it up. Had to be Jamar Chase. Is my roster going to be empty? Oh, no, not Jamar Chase. Sorry, my apologies. It was Malik Neighbors because Malik Neighbors' season-ending injury. So somebody dropped Malik Neighbors, and I picked him up like the week before I didn't make the championship game. I played in the 3-4 game. Won that, finished third. Not a big deal. So I picked up Malik Neighbors like the week before that game happened, and he's sitting on my bench. I didn't even have an IR slot, nothing. He's literally just sitting on my bench. And so I'm talking to the commissioner. I'm like, hey, keepers are due, not till next year starts or whatever, but I was like, when keepers come due and you're doing this based off of average draft position, I did not draft Malik Neighbors. I picked him up off a waiver wire. So I should get him for the cost of a 12th round pick because next year it's a guy that I claimed off the waivers. Like, I even let it sit for a week and nobody picked him up. So like, I didn't even claim him. I just picked him up off the free agency pool. So obviously a little different basketball and football here, but like everybody in the leagues had the opportunity to go and look and see that Malik Neighbors was available in the free agency pool. Nobody picked him up for that entire first week when he was on waivers. And then I scooped him up and stashed him at the bottom of my roster, which means I was overruled because whatever stupid, dumb league rules. Like, if that had been not a superstar, I would have been able to keep him we're doing free agents as 12th or last round pick or whatever it is. So, like, if that was not a superstar, I would have gotten him at the end of next year's draft. Same rule kind of applies for basketball here. If you were to drop one of the guys off your roster that is super valuable, but for some reason you need the space, like you don't have an IR slot available, whatever, yada, yada, and he sits for an entire waiver period and nobody picks him up, and then somebody else comes along and scoops him up, like, good for that other person because they were, like, astute enough to check the player pool and see who was available, and you didn't have the room on your roster to keep him, so you had to drop him, and you didn't say anything because you were hoping that nobody would see it. So that's kind of like the competitiveness there, right? Like the person who saw that you dropped him and had the roster spot available was aware enough to see it, pick it up, and stash him on his roster, and you lost that guy because you had to drop him. Now it sucks for you, but that's just kind of the name of the game. Is like if you're not paying attention to who's available within your league, you could miss out on some valuable guys that are sitting on the waiver wire. So like why would you even put into your group chat of your league that like somebody of value is available on the waiver wire? That just to me that doesn't really make any sense. I don't. That's just not something that I would ever do. And if you're playing in a keeper league like that, like my football example, like if you're playing in a keeper league and you grab somebody off the waiver wire, I would petition to the commissioner that you get to keep that player as a waiver addition rather than if it's like if it's Derek Lively who was probably drafted within the first, I don't know, 5 or 6 rounds or whatever of your redraft league, and you want to keep him because he's a valuable guy and he's coming back off injury, like you should be able to keep him as a waiver addition rather than somebody that was picked in the fourth round, you know? But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, that sounds like a very used story, I first want to say. I think I'm of 2 minds. It's like, I don't ever think it should be like an established, like, "Oh, let's not talk about said player," right? Like, I would never, I mean, I'm the commissioner of our dynasty league. I would never go around and be like, "Guys, this player was dropped, like, let's not talk about it," I would never do that. But in a competitive league, any advantage you can gain, I think, is fair game, right? If the league is a bunch of people who have played a lot and there's different levels of participation, I think it's perfectly fine to ask why are you helping out these players, these other players, right? In a less competitive league, I could see someone being like, "Hey, your roster's pretty bad, like you should consider this," right? It doesn't help me, but maybe it'll help you. But that's very context dependent. But a lot of leagues Bentley and I participate in are competitive, some are not nearly as so, or maybe there's a knowledge gap. I think if it's a knowledge gap and not a participation gap, a discussion can be warranted because especially in a dynasty league, you plan to play with these people for many, many years. There's some social equity that comes with that, right? Like, people are like, "Oh, I'll trade with this person, they helped me out before," like, just from a strategy perspective, it's not always what you have, it's who you know when it comes to, like, moves and stuff like that, and I don't mean that in, like, what players do you know, like, what do you know about the people in your league, right? Like, if you're trying to trade or make moves, but if you're in a very competitive league, I think it is perfectly reasonable to have the strategy of not discussing the waiver publicly. I think that's a perfectly legitimate strategy. I would never set that as a rule, because I want to, at least in my leagues, I want people to want to be able to discuss stuff if they want to. But if, 4 of you in a 10-team league are active and y'all are like, "We're not going to discuss waiver wire," like you decide, right? Those other 6 aren't paying attention anyway, so it's not gonna do anything. So you just never establish it as a rule. It becomes an unwritten thing. I'm fine with that. I don't see a problem with it. It is a legitimate strategy. I also would not restrict where the transaction doesn't show up. Like, if that's what you're talking about, where someone's like, "Oh, I don't want the transaction of a waiver drop to show up," I wouldn't do that either. But I do think there's legitimate social strategy to talking about it or not talking about it, and I think that should be allowed. Just like they say, you don't play the game on paper, right? It's kind of the same way, even in fantasy to some extent. There is social things, and I think for a league based off its competitiveness, its friendliness, those types of things, you would approach that differently. But if you're in a very competitive league, I think it's a fine strategy. So yeah, anything else, Bentley, on that?
No, I mean, you put it nicely. Just kind of gauge the room.
Yeah,
Talking about available players, not something that I would ever do in like a super competitive league. But if it's just like kind of for fun, there's no money on the line or anything, might be okay to do. But it's just the level of competitiveness that you're planning on playing at kind of dictates the rules there.
yeah. I read the room. That's a good way to put it. I appreciate that. Something we all can work on. Myself included. I'm pretty bad at it. That's all we have. Those are all of our questions. I'm glad we were able to get through all of them. I hope to do more of these in the future. And as time goes, hopefully different questions, different people in the community asking different things. I first want to say thanks to the subreddit for giving us questions. Maybe in like a month or two, we'll do another one. But once maybe closer to the end of the season, different questions, I imagine, because off season and dynasty is arguably even more important than during the season. Probably a lot of draft talk and things like that. We did some draft talk, but probably even more draft talk and those types of things. So thanks everybody for giving us the questions. Bentley, you have anything you want to say before we head out?
Duke shooting 78% from the floor in the second half tonight, so that's pretty
Yeah.
cool. Also, I'm still not over the refs only calling 1 foul in the Duke North Carolina game at Chapel Hill. That was bullshit, including on the game-winning shot that Boozer had at the bucket, but whatever, we move forward. We're gonna beat them by 40 when they come to Cameron Indoor in 2 weeks.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's undoubtedly going to happen. Well, no Caleb Wilson, that helps. I think he's supposed to be out for that. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, again, appreciate everybody listening. Give us a rating. Haven't had anybody do that yet. So it'd be nice to get our first rating. We got our first like today. So on YouTube, don't know if that was Sam's family or not, but we'll take it. We're open to keep putting these out, on a relatively regular basis and, discuss different things as we go, find a nice rhythm to this. So appreciate everybody coming by and we will, see you next time.